Hello, everyone. Episode 54 of Going Live with Good Soil. Matt and I here as usual. Format of this is we are on Twitter Spaces and our YouTube channel for Good Soil Investment Management live at the same time, both recorded in both places. Typically talk about the macro markets first a bit, and then talk about Tesla and Elon and other stocks we cover, and then we go into a Q&A and anything else interesting to talk about. So I guess we'll start things off. It's been a busy week, Matt, busy few days especially. Elon sent that letter on Friday that he's attempting to terminate the deal. The Tesla stock went up, right away in after hours on Friday, and had a bit of a rough day yesterday, as much of the macro market did, especially the tech stocks, and all the EV stocks were down, 5 to 7%, it seems like yesterday. So I'm not sure if it was Tesla specific yesterday, but the macro market's flip-flopping. That's what we start with. CPI numbers coming out tomorrow. What are your thoughts about the CPI? The White House is already leaking, or there's rumors that they're saying don't expect it to be tough. Do you think they know the CPI number before it gets published, or they get some kind of hint about it?
I wouldn't have thought that they do, but based on the commentary that we're seeing of these pre-leaks, it does make me think that probably they do.
Yeah, that's strange, right?
It's really strange. You would kind of think that in a well-run government that the parties responsible for each part of their responsibilities would just be able to carry that out. But it seems instead Biden is wanting to be very involved in all aspects of just about everything, and I almost don't know what to make of it. You get these pre-leaks, which I get I'm not necessarily opposed to them, but it's a little bit odd. I don't know what's your thought on these kind of pre-leaks. I think it's unprecedented as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, we saw tons of leaks in the last administration. There was leaks left and right. It seems like there was, I don't know what was going on, but it was very intentional almost. And for the White House to publicly, this is beyond just a leak though. This is the White House publicly acknowledging hey, we think the number's not going to be so good. Are they getting a pre-read, leaking and then leaking it out before they publicly leak it? Are they leaking it out to some BlackRock asset manager? I don't know. It just seems hopefully they're not. Hopefully it's a tight ship and they're just worried that it's going to be tough. But it would really, it's very unsettling if they are getting the CPI number days before it's publicly released, because that there's going to be some leakage privately within that, above what the White House is publicly saying here, right? So yeah. It's very unsettling. So I don't.
Yeah, I'd kind of think that they're not getting the actual number, but maybe there's some analysis that's going into the number that's going to be released tomorrow, and it's those preliminary or feeder numbers are looking worse than maybe people thought, and maybe somehow that information is making its way back to the White House. That might make sense, but I don't know. It's just a little bit odd. You'd almost rather have this run its own course and let the Fed be responsible for managing inflation and not the White House.
Yeah, I know. It's well, if the number turns out to be not as bad as expected tomorrow, then we'll know that maybe the White House isn't getting a leak and they're just speculating or something. So hopefully that's the case, and then we can kind of through negative deduction confirm that the White House is not kind of getting some secret information before the rest of us on this and sharing it.
Yeah, so. I hope that's the case. And even with everything that we're seeing, you got to keep in mind that this is a lagging indicator. So we're talking about what's happened in June or here in July, and what we've seen since is that the commodity prices have still continued to fall. So it's certainly possible that we have higher than expected June inflation, but I think what's way more important is what happens going forward. Not whether we're plus or minus 0.5% in June or not. But that said, it's a really impactful number for the stock market. So we'll certainly be keeping a close eye on it.
Yeah. The market is the market could go up or down 3% based on this number, easily, in my view. So it might stay
Market
flat. It
seems to
might
go
zigzag a
up
little bit, but
3% on like nothing these days. So yeah, who knows?
yeah, yeah. Who knows? Who knows? And anything else in the macro market? I mean, the Fed has their next meeting end of July. I mean, do you think it's going to be 50 or anything changing I mean, anything else macro market we should cover before we go into
No,
Elon, Tesla
I don't
stuff?
think so. You know, I mean, inflation is the big story right now. I mean, I think the Fed is definitely being conservative and in trying to make sure that, you know, inflation doesn't get away from us. I think the question right now is whether it's 75 basis points or 50. And
Hmm.
I kind of think the information we get tomorrow on that CPI release is going to kind of dictate whether it's 75 or 50. I mean,
Hmm.
if it's a lot better than expected, maybe it's 50. And then, you know, we'll kind of wait until we see the July numbers next month, and then maybe we'll get a better idea of like, is inflation really easing up, or are we still legitimately concerned? And if we're still legitimately concerned, then Fed's going to kind of continue course, and we'll have several more 50, 75 basis point hikes throughout the rest of the year. But we'll kind of see. I don't expect them to be very eager to change course unless we get like some huge surprise on the conservative side with CPI.
Yeah, I think that's about right too. So we'll see. I mean, the recession, we'll find that GDP print for Q2. I think is that later this month or the beginning of next month. I forget exactly when that comes out, but that's what'll confirm. I think that we're in a recession technically right now, and maybe that'll, change the macro markets a bit. Like bad news is good news. Like now, we're officially in a recession, so the Fed's gonna not be as aggressive as they were, or something. So that's
Yeah,
what I think.
that was kind of funny. Last week we got like the great employment numbers, and it was like, oh, like look how strong employment numbers are, so the stock market has to go down. It's just,
Yeah,
it's so bizarre. Like this, good news is bad news, and vice versa situation we're in right
yeah.
now.
It's a bizarro world, of the stock market. Yeah. So, I mean, Elon, the big news with Tesla is the stock's been zigzagging. I mean, it went down a lot yesterday with the rest of the EV stocks. It was up a lot on Friday after hours, especially after Elon sent the letter that he wants to terminate the Twitter acquisition. I put out a poll yesterday asking, all the Tesla, we're in the Tesla Twitterverse, and 80% of my followers, or 90%, or maybe 95% are like Tesla bulls, and Elon and Tesla fanatics, so I put out the poll amongst us of, what do you think the chances are, like 2 years from now, Elon is in control of Twitter? So like after all this lawsuit, basically, whatever the valuation is, Elon officially controlling Twitter or not. And amongst all of the bulls, fit to 50-50, split. It was like 39% said yes, 38% said no, and like 23% said see results or whatever. He's put that in the polls. So it was 50-50 split, it seemed like. I wonder if that's the same split with the general public in general, like the financial media or whatever, financial, investors in general, not just Tesla bulls. But most people, I think, seem to think this is more of a negotiating tactic for a lower market cap. That they're gonna agree on later. Do you have any thoughts on that? Have you read anything interesting? I mean, what do you think, Matt?
There's so much speculation on what's going on here right now. To me, it seems like the most likely situation is just that he really is skeptical of the bots.
Yeah,
And then on top of that, you've got like a very significantly deteriorating macro market, which really those two things in particular, like if you consider deteriorating macro, what that does is reduce your multiples that you should be willing to pay for any business. And then if you look at like the declining macro environment also from the perspective of like a Twitter advertiser who's their main customer, they're going to say, all right, well, we need to cut back on advertising because one, macro is deteriorating, and two, seems like there might be more bots than we suspected. So
yeah,
like I think like it's a very legitimate decrease in value relative to where the company was in April, that Elon is trying to kind of recognize with this kind of walk away tactic that he's got going on. Now, whether he wants to walk away completely or simply use this as a negotiating tactic, I kind of sense he'd rather just walk away from it completely. I really do think that's more likely rather than, this is just purely negotiating. But, I'm not sure. And it could just be a total blunder as well. I give less credence to that, but it's certainly possible that, he kind of made an offer at the exact wrong time and didn't realize how much of a distraction from Tesla it would be and from SpaceX. And like you had the huge, static fire mishap that happened yesterday with the Starship. And maybe he just says like, I don't want to try to deal with turning around this culture of this like company that frankly doesn't want me at the helm. Like we kind of know the culture doesn't like Elon. And so maybe I think he's just trying to actually walk away, but given the premium that he's offered relative to today's prices, it may be hard for him to actually walk away from that. But I'm curious, what do you think, Emmett?
Yeah, I think it's like this guy Alex on Twitter put out a thread that Elon liked about the analogy of the house of, the real estate deal. And Elon kind of mentioned that analogy in a couple of his interviews, where it's like a house of termite. Like, you get an inspector and you start figuring out there's way more termites in this house than you thought. And it's deal is contingent upon the passes the inspections as represented by the seller and so forth, sort of like when you're buying a house. And it's clear that, the bots and spam issue is much worse than Twitter has let on. And I think you're right. I think if it was anyone else, I would say this is a negotiating tactic. But because it's Elon Musk, and I think he's, it's crazy that there's this conspiracy theory going around that he did it as like a distraction so he could sell Tesla shares. Like that's ridiculous. I don't know how that gets any traction, but like it was they on CNBC, like David Faber, one of the most respected CNBC commentators, if there are any, is mentioning that he's going to get sued. And like they're talking about like yesterday that this is a ploy for him to, and also like Fortune magazine or Fortune, some reporter wrote a story about this. And I heard a Bloomberg interview on Bloomberg radio this morning with a lawyer, but the lawyer's like representing like the Twitter people. And so it's like almost like probably a paid advertisement by these people to like get their case out. But he's talking about how he thinks Elon's manipulating stock prices so he can sell shares of Tesla or something. It's so ridiculous, this conspiracy thinking that goes around. Like, who in their right mind can actually, like, with all the information, would believe this? So like, sure, media reporting is probably going to go crazy with this conspiracy thinking now, it seems like, but in a jury, I don't think it stands. The people who get all the information, they're going to see this is ridiculous. This thought that Elon, pretended to buy Twitter so he could have an excuse to sell Tesla shares. He could have sold Tesla shares anyway. I mean, what the heck? It's like ridiculous. So it's sad that there's this like dichotomy. Like half the people think Elon is genuine, like I do and you do, and most of the people that follow us. But then there's like, I don't know if it's half, but it's probably like most people think he's genuine. But then there's like a subset of people, and some of them are like financial media influencers, or the media likes to run with it. And a subset of people that think he's a complete like fraud and liar about all this stuff. And he's just like trying to get richer, like he's living on some yacht somewhere. So, he's not, he's like, it's like, yeah, it's
I wonder how much of that is legitimate though, because like I've there's a Twitter account, I'm not going to name names, but who is incredibly negative. Not Taylor Ogan, because I know he and I have gotten into it a little bit lately, but another somewhat prominent like anti-Tesla like Twitter account, and I had like a conversation with them, and they were pretty reasonable and like like made some decent cases of why Tesla is like overvalued or whatever. But then like you see them on Twitter, and there's all these like incredibly like crazy like conspiracy theory tinfoil hat kind of like cases, and I'm like, if you had said those things to me in person, I think I'd like hang up the phone, because it's just like I don't trust your judgment. So I do think that there's this tendency of people to kind of like present like the more ludicrous cases on like anonymous Twitter accounts that are kind of talking to each other rather than like presenting a legitimate business case of why Tesla is overvalued. And I think if you talk to the better of those accounts, like an actual one-on-one, and say like, okay, hey, like here's where I could be wrong, here's where you could be wrong. I think like the common ground is a little bit more reasonable, but I think what you get on Twitter is a little bit nuts sometimes in terms of the Tesla Q community.
Yeah. I don't understand it. It's like a different reality some of these people live in, and I'm glad I'm not part of that reality. That would be a very negative world to be in. It's just
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the guys, so somewhere on here, Jazz CF D-Rack. I'm sorry if I'm botching your name, but he says, "Forget Tesla Q dum-dums." And I think that's kind of funny. So I did this interview with Sandy Monroe yesterday. That'll drop.
Yeah, how
not on
was
our
that? Tell
channel,
us
but
about that.
somewhere
Yeah.
else. In the next day or two. But he went off at one point about like all these like short sellers and how one, just like how like warped their incentives are, but two, how they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Which I thought was just super interesting, because we were talking to him about like, we keep hearing the competition is coming, Sandy. Like, what do you actually think about that? And like, what would it take for them to actually catch up? And he was basically saying all the people that are telling you the competition is coming don't know what the hell they're talking about. And so I thought that was really interesting. He didn't put it quite that bluntly, but that was a lot of what he was saying is like the people who are actually watching this space, like they don't know, they're like a lot of MBAs that are saying like, well, people at GM and people at Ford aren't dumb, so they'll catch up. And he's saying, well,
look at all the case studies we studied in school. It makes sense they're going to catch up, or they don't really know what's going on in reality with this technology.
Or you talk about like Adam Smith's invisible hand, and so like Tesla can't make 25% gross margins while the other companies make 10% gross margins. Like eventually that has to balance out, and like that seems like it makes sense in theory. But then when you talk to Sandy, and he's like, okay, well, sure, but like Tesla's already has 25% gross margins, well, 27 actually, and right now they're in the process of like implementing gigapresses, which he was like, little side tangent here, he was super impressed with that. Just like completely blown away by like how amazing that technology was, and how much efficiency it would bring to their body shop. And so he was just saying like, this is like crazy. And so that's going to like leapfrog them from, 27 to something else, like a lot better. He was, I was thinking of it a lot from like a financial analyst standpoint, and he was thinking of it from like a manufacturing efficiency and how many jobs and how many like supply chain people you'd be able to eliminate, and like the improved efficiency of like the people on the floor who are going to like go from welding a bunch of stuff together to just like literally dropping in chairs on top of the battery pack, bolting them in, and then like just using a robotic arm to like push it up into the frame. And he's saying like that's just it's like revolutionary how much of an improvement in like the work, like the general assembly efficiency that is going to have. So he was just super, super impressed. So like you talk about Tesla, who already has these crazy margins, like leapfrogging to this new thing, which is going to be hitting their financial statements like in Q3, in Q4 and beyond. And we're like, okay, well, who can catch up? And he's like, well, so far nobody else is ordering, these gigapress, like these giga machines. Like there's several companies that could be doing that, but it's like an 8-month lead time. Plus you got to have like your design actually match the, the
press,
the press,
what it outputs, the output of it. Yeah,
exactly. And you've got to have a spot for this in your factory. And so like nobody's committing to that yet. So even if like you were to snap your fingers today and say like, okay, Ford or GM or whoever is going to, implement a gigapress, it doesn't just show up in your financials in the next quarter. Like it takes a lot of time. You got to be like legitimately committed to significant changes in your manufacturing footprint and your supply chain, procurement policies and like your engineering. It's like a very big commitment. And so far as he can tell, nobody is doing it yet. Like there's signs that will be changing. He's got like thoughts on who could be leading going forward, but like this is just like one of the things that Tesla is already leading on, and it's like, okay, like
there's so many other
leapfrogging
aspects
like
too.
Who's
they're already at 27% margins, planning for this change ahead of time, and it's going to be implemented soon. And yeah, it's so clear to me that they're just like steps, step changes ahead of the rest. Competition is not coming. Competition is falling further behind, the longer Tesla operates. That's the real narrative, I think. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that was like, I was trying not to have that mindset going in there. I wanted to like let the facts kind of lead where they would, but and talking to all the people there, they were so impressed. And then like one of the things.
So is that Sandy? So everyone who's jumping in, Matt went to visit Monroe and Associates yesterday, right? They're like sort of close to you. How far of a drive was it from where you live?
Yeah, so it was about 45 minutes from where I live. There's this guy, Alex from Florida, who I guess is a fan of the channel, and he's watched some of what we do. And he kind of got an email from Tesla saying like, hey, he could take an accelerated delivery of the Model Y that he ordered about 6 months ago from Texas, if he upgraded to like a performance version or something like that. So he just reached out to Monroe and Associates on a whim, said, hey, I got this, update. Would you like to take delivery on my behalf? And so they kind of jumped at the opportunity. Wow. And he just said, hey, yeah, sure, you take this delivery. I'd love to just go see your facility, Monroe and Associates. It's in so boil down AH in the comment says, where is Monroe located? It's in a place called Auburn Hills, Michigan. So it's like in the Metro Detroit area, kind of in the middle of like the big three Detroit automakers, like supply chain center in that Metro Detroit area. So I drove there yesterday, met this guy Alex there with his cousin, who's like 12 years old, went and visited. We toured a bunch of, we saw the Rivian R1T. There was like this Chinese vehicle, which was pretty sweet. Actually, it was called the Skywell, which was like, to me, that was one of the like my biggest takeaways was like this Skywell company probably, like if they could produce like a $30,000 to $40,000 vehicle that was of a similar quality to what we drove yesterday, I feel like they could gain a decent amount of market share, because it was very comparable to like, I don't know, like a Jeep Range, like a Grand Cherokee or something like that, like a kind of minimal bells and whistles.
It was made by a Chinese company. They're called Skywell. They're not public, I guess. They're probably not public then. Yeah.
I'd never heard of the company before, but like we drove, like it was not a great car. Like it didn't, like compared to driving a Rivian or a Tesla or like a BMW. There was a BMW i4 that we drove yesterday too, and it was like clearly it's not on the same level as those, but like it had a very familiar dashboard. It had like, it was very clear to like understand like how you do pretty much everything in there. And I feel like for like an entry level EV, where a lot of people kind of get intimidated by the tech level of like, or Rivian or a Tesla, or like, just how different it is to like put your key card in and do some of those things. Like, I feel like this could be a good entry level, entrance that could really convert a lot of people. So, looking at the, the GM offerings and the Ford offerings and everything, I'm like, it seems like it's very crowded in like the $50,000 and above segment, but I think the Chinese are going to be pretty successful in the long run. They're not there yet, but in the long run of kind of competing in this, $30,000 to $50,000 range, because it was a legitimately pretty impressive car.
So you got there, you saw a bunch of cars, test drove a bunch. You talked with Sandy Monroe for a while. You had a nice interview. And how many associates? It's Monroe and Associates, so there's like a bunch of people there, right? It's like a big building of some sort or office.
Yeah, pretty big building. So yeah, we spoke with Corey at the beginning, who's like the president of the company. He's pretty active on the Monroe and Associates YouTube page. He kind of handed us off to the live like group, and they kind of showed us how they handled their videos and showed us a bunch of the vehicles that they'd already kind of like torn apart, and they were all like up on the boards and everything like that. Then we got to go over and see the Model Y, which was, they're in the process of disassembling from Texas. And it was super cool, because they lifted this body up, like it was like above us, you could walk underneath it. And so it was just like the frame, you could see where the battery pack was taken out, and like there were the back chairs were still on there, and there was like the glass roof was like over above you, and like the steering wheel was still there. So it was just like, you can kind of see, like they just took this one major component out, which had like the front seats, the two front seats, and the battery pack, and that was like the majority of the car was gone. So it was really cool to like see that. And then it was actually right next to an R1T that they were disassembling from Rivian. And it was crazy, because like I'm not an engineer by any stretch, but they had this like one piece of metal that was like about this big. I don't even remember what it did, but they were just saying like how inefficient some of the weldings that they were doing were. And like I'm just looking at this, and I could see, on this one little hunk of metal, there were probably 3 or 4 dozen welds. And I'm just thinking like how inefficient that must be for like one person to spend this much time, like, like welding. Like welders get paid a lot of money to,
They do,
be
yeah.
welding. It's like, that's a very high skill job. And
Yeah.
so like for like just this one component to be like so labor intensive, and then like comparing that to what Tesla does, where it's just like super highly automated. Sandy was saying they do like this injection molding on this frame, this gig casting, in about 3 or 4 milliseconds. They shoot all the aluminum in there, and it just gets molded and then they don't have to heat treat it. They don't have to do any sort of like metal treatment whatsoever after that.
Yeah,
It's just like,
at the Cyber Rodeo, they had a big demo of it. It was pretty impressive. Yeah, and they showed like a visualization of it, and it's really impressive, that Giga casting, the Giga press. Yeah,
yeah,
pretty cool.
it really is.
So
So it was just it was so much fun. Like I really felt like I was like in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, just like walking around. I was like, I had this like goofy smile on my face all day long. It was just so much fun to be in there and like walk around and see it all. It was really cool.
you got to ride the Cyber. I saw like a picture of you riding the Cyber Quad or whatever, the little Tesla Cyber Quad. Was that pretty neat? That little thing. I was thinking about
That
getting one of
was.
those. I don't know.
So it wasn't the actual, like Tesla ATV or anything like that. It was like
Oh, it
the
wasn't.
radio
Oh,
flyer version of it for kids.
okay.
So,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it was still
yeah,
really cool.
yeah.
And probably the, the cooler thing though is just like actually talking to Sandy and like, picking his brain on how far Tesla has come, and, like who the actual competition is. And because like I kind of think nobody's going to catch up to Tesla, but like Sandy's got very clear views in his mind of like he was actually much more bullish on Ford than I would have thought. He was saying like
Really?
the F-150 Lightning is a way better product than he was expecting. Same thing with
Wow.
the Mach-E. But he was like ripping into GM, and basically like he's expecting. He
Wow.
didn't say this, but I think reading between the lines, he's expecting GM to go bankrupt because basically they're managed by like a bunch of MBAs, and they don't really know what they're talking about. And
Wow.
they're just so yeah, it was interesting. Just a super fun experience, and being able to kind of go there and see the team that's behind these super impressive, like breakdowns, and talk about like what's so impressive about the 4680s. This is one of the crazy things is like how far Tesla has come already. In terms of, we talked about getting like a 27% gross margin in Q1, but he was talking about like there was like a 30 to 40% savings that he could see just in like unnecessary steps on the like the body shop that they would need to like handle the like the Model Y shop in Austin, and it's just like it's crazy to think that like Tesla already has this huge advantage, and then they're going to be like kind of like leapfrogging and pushing the envelope even further, at a moment when these other companies are just saying like, well, should we do what Tesla already did, like 12 months ago, and if we do, then we'll get there 12 months from now. So it's just like it really reinforced my bullishness as an investor. Just to kind of see how far Tesla already is, and how much respect somebody who really understands the engineering part of it has for Tesla.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I'm looking forward to a little drop an interview on their social media channel probably in the next few days or something that you did with them.
Yep. So there was like a 50-minute interview. They wanted to put it on a different channel, so I'll definitely retweet that. And
Okay.
maybe we'll put a link to it on this video whenever it goes live. But yeah, it should go out in the next, hopefully even later today, but maybe tomorrow. We'll have this like roughly 50-minute interview that goes out.
Cool. I'm excited to listen to it or watch it. So neat. Any other takeaways from how were you there the whole day or for a few hours, or what was yeah.
Yeah, I got there around like 9:30 or something like that, and like kind of walked around all during lunch, or before lunch. Saw a bunch of the stuff that they were working on. One of the surprising things was, they're trying to tear apart the battery pack right now. I guess they've been working on that since last Thursday, and it's just so dense and like so well put together that they're having a very, very difficult time actually opening up like the lid of this battery pack. It was kind of crazy because it's like this big pack, and it was like a can of sardines. They twisted up the top of it from these two different areas, but then there was all this like pink foam that they couldn't like they were having a very difficult time like removing the pink foam and this like insulating like plastic material to like remove that to get to the actual point where the 4680 cells were. So it was like, you talk about a structural battery pack, like this is a legitimately incredibly structural like piece of equipment. It's like you sort of think like it's a battery pack, like you'll be able to like remove it from the frame, take out a couple bolts, like remove the lid, and then take out a cell. But this is way more of like an integrated assembly that's it's like one thing completely. Like there was so much of this this like insulating foam and this I forget what they called it, like a resin or something like that that was like integrated into this component that like the battery pack like had this huge amount of flexibility and like rigidity that it was so hard for them, way harder than they were expecting to actually like remove the components from each other to actually get to the place where they could pluck an individual cell. So that was, I thought that was kind of interesting. Like just you hear about structural cell, then when you get to the point where you're actually trying to like, you know, take a component of the structure out, how difficult that is for a team as qualified as Monroe. I thought that was just kind of interesting.
Yeah, like you have Jordan from the Limiting Factor showing his teardown of the actual battery cell, and then you think that's like the magic, but then the magic is also the pack and how they structure it, and that's where Monroe and Associates are trying to reverse engineer the actual pack, you know, and figure out how to get cells out of it and stuff, and how they put it in there. And it's interesting that all that goes into this. So cool.
Yeah, like I saw that the one from Jordan, like they had this like pristine cell, this 4680, where you could see all the metal all around it. And I was talking to Corey about that. I was like, are you gonna be able to get out a cell like that without any of the stuff on it? And he's like, no, like I'm pretty sure all the cells that we get out are gonna have like this pink stuff wrapped around it. Cause they were like, there's one way that they found that can get the pink stuff off of it, but it was like a highly toxic, highly flammable and electrically conductive material that would like get the pink stuff off of it. And they're like, well, that's incredibly dangerous to like, you know, douse a battery that, you know, that is so conductive and flammable with like a material that enhances that essentially. So they were, you know, not really sure how they'd get that pink material out of that.
Yeah, no, that's it must be a crazy job working at Monroe and Associates. I mean, you're just like, you're part like it's like sometimes you're like in a lab and sometimes you're like just doing engineering, or you're constantly reverse engineering thing. I don't know. It must be an interesting job to go to a 9 to 5 every day and do that. It'd be pretty fun.
Yeah, and I can't say enough great things about the people that work there. I mean, they were so generous with their time. They were like, they didn't have to be as nice to us as they were, because like we weren't helping them in any way. Like they already had the car from this guy Alex. Like they had everything they needed from us, but they really went out of their way to just, you know, say, hey, we really appreciate, you know, to this Alex guy that you gave us this car, you know, meant a lot to us, and we want to make sure you get as much as possible out of your visit here. And so they were, you know, they give us like access to all sorts of stuff. And one thing I'm really excited to see, actually, a little bit of a side note here, but they had this one area that was completely cordoned off. They're like, we cannot let you go like beyond this black curtain over here, because there's something super exciting that we're working on here. And we can't wait to like show it, but like we cannot tell you anything. And like we
kind of like trying to like behind a curtain,
like nuggets. Well, it was like a, you know, 20-foot curtain and like by like 50 feet or something like that. It was like no joke. And they were very like, you know, there were some parts where technically we weren't supposed to take pictures, but they let us take pictures anyways. They're like, just please don't, you know, post them yet until, you know, our next video goes up. But like this other area, like we can't even talk about it. So we were talking to Sandy. We're like, so like, when do you think we might find out what's beyond there? And he's like, oh, like end of this month probably, and it's gonna be like really mind blowing. And then like we're talking to his team afterwards, and they're like, no way it's end of this month. It's more like October, but it's gonna be more mind blowing than what Sandy thought. So like,
I wonder what it is. It's probably not Tesla related. It's probably something else related, right? I mean, what do you think? Like RC Moto or something? Like, I don't know.
I'm slightly I don't think this is it, but like we had this list of questions that we wanted to kind of go over with Sandy. The one and it was like kind of very wide ranging. And the one thing which he refused to comment about, which surprised me, was the Tesla bot, like Optimus. So like I don't think he would actually have access to like a prototype,
or something.
Even some of the components of the prototype.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't think that's it, but I can't think of what else it might be that he was so secretive about
There's
it.
no way. Yeah, there's no way Tesla would let Monroe and Associates have it behind a black curtain. Like, they could go to the
But I
bathroom,
could
you
see,
could
like,
sneak peek there, and then word would get out, you know?
the
Like,
one thing I was thinking is, like, it could be, like, some, like, joints or, like, some subcomponents within, like, Optimus
maybe.
that, like, they're like, how do you, like, balance the knee joint or something like that in an Optimus? And so maybe they're
Maybe.
advising on some of that, but
It's possible. I don't know. I think Tesla's engineering people are top notch. You know, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think it's got to be something not Tesla related is my thought, but it might. Maybe it is. Maybe it is Tesla related. We'll see. Yeah, I know he's like a part investor. I think in RC Moto or something, so he's not allowed to talk about it. But or he's like an advisor. Or I don't know.
yeah,
He
well,
says
they
he's not
had
allowed
one
to
of
talk about it.
those. They had one of those there. Like, he does a lot of
Yeah.
consulting. Like, that was one of the things walking
Yeah.
through there. Like the breadth of consulting that he does. Like, they had there was like a golf cart. I didn't know, like, they've got like 80% market share on like golf carts apparently, because
Wow.
like they helped to like design this like special rain gutter where like the rain would like flow through these back pillars on this
Oh
golf
wow.
cart. And like, so they had that, and like there's stuff that they were doing like with airplanes. And there was a whole separate defense building, which was like, there was like no windows in this building at all, and like he's like, we cannot take you over there because it's defense, so it's like you need like security clearances to get over into that other building. And so
Wow. That's
like,
cool.
clearly the secret thing was not defense related because it wasn't in that building, but it was,
Okay.
something
Okay.
else.
Interesting. Wow. So they do things for the Department of Defense and such. Yeah, that's cool. Well, yeah, he's been in the business for a long time. He's pretty well respected, is my understanding. So, yeah, I can't wait to see that interview when it is it going to be on the Monroe Live YouTube channel or something else? Do you think or
No, there's another YouTube channel. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but this guy Alex, who gave Monroe
oh,
the
okay.
the car, he's a fan of
Thank you,
this
Alex. By the
channel.
way, yeah. If Alex is
Yeah,
listening, thank you. Appreciate
huge thank
getting
you. He
Matt an
doesn't want
invite
his last
there.
name to be known, so we're just gonna
Sure.
call him Alex from Florida. But he was a super cool guy. Just like, one of my takeaways was how amazing this Tesla community is, because going to like see this place and like just meeting this guy who's been a fan of the channel and the stuff that we're doing is like, it was so cool. And he
Neat.
brought his
Yeah.
cousin along who's like 12 years old, and like seeing him geek out over all this stuff. And that it was another little side note, but like, like we saw like the Rivian, we saw this Chinese EV, we were in this BMW i4, which was like ridiculous. And then like we saw like all the stuff being like torn apart. But his 12-year-old cousin who was on this tour with us was most impressed with my car, like the Tesla Model Y, like long range.
Wow.
Like, it had like fart mode, and then like I showed him like the full self-driving data where like like I took my hands off while the wheel turned,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Oh my gosh!" And then like, you see, like all the, like I showed him the light show, like the Christmas,
Yeah.
like the holiday thing, and like he
Oh,
was just
cool.
like
You
giggling,
love that the
like
most, huh?
completely giggling over like all these little features. And he loved all those things. And he's like, for sure, what I want the most is like the Tesla Model Y, not all these other super cool things that we'd see. And so seeing like a
Yeah.
12-year-old geek out over all this stuff was kind of reinforcing of like where the future really is in this
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, sounds like a fun trip, fun time. And anything else Tesla related we should talk about or Elon related before we kind of go into Q&A? It's not,
Yeah, I mean, there was the big Starship failure, the static fire test that they had yesterday.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We've already droned on quite some time, so maybe we can just go into Q&A. But that was kind of surprising. It seems like from Elon's reaction that was worse, much worse than he was expecting. It seemed.
Yeah. Yeah. It seemed like that. And that he was like personally inspecting it and such. And yeah, I mean, I think they have to make some fixes, but it's good that they make these things happen. That's why they have these tests for, right? They don't want these things to happen when they're actually doing like a production launch with like, a mission, right? This was just like a static fire test of some sort. And so you expect these types of failures to happen from time to time and you fix them so they don't happen when they go do the live launches.
Yeah.
So I guess this particular failure they didn't anticipate as to be as big as it was or to happen at all. And so,
Yeah.
interesting
I
though.
think that the risk there is just like with how many engines could have been damaged by that. Like it's tough work getting a Raptor produced, and they're doing a lot to get that production rate up as high as possible. But I mean, you could imagine if all those Raptors were damaged pretty significantly, that could be a pretty material setback to the next static fire that they even have. So to me, like the timeline risk is the biggest issue, not necessarily like how significant the damage was, or the fact that there was an issue. It's just how far back does it set us?
Yeah. I see Doge Nation is saying Sandy Monroe is a consultant for Apple Car project, he thinks. I don't know about that. I don't know. I think Project Titan or whatever they call it at Apple is probably super secretive over there too, just like I think a lot of Teslas are. So who knows? Maybe. But we'll see. And then he also asked about the RoboVan. That RoboVan should be, I guess Elon's, kind of considering a RoboVan a bigger thing than the Model Y when they create their robo vehicle. So it'll be interesting if we'll get an unveiling of that at some point in the next couple of years. But let's go into Q&A, I guess. I'm reading the comments here. There's a lot of questions that come up in the comments of the YouTube Live, but some people have tweeted questions too. So first question from Mark Gomez Tejada on YouTube Live. With all the PE compression in the markets and Tesla becoming more of a value company in the coming year, I guess, what PE would you consider for in the coming years? What PE would you consider for 23, 2024, 25, 2030? Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think PE is one metric that people often cite, and a lot of it depends on the growth rate of the company. I think that what the appropriate PE is, like, not just the industry they're in, but also the growth rate and the type of, margin, that's all representing the PE, I guess. But this PEG thing is something probably a little more important, right? I mean, what are your thoughts, Matt? What do you think about the PE or the PEG of Tesla in the future?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the one thing that was drilled into me as like an investment banking analyst is that if you're going to use multiples analysis, which is what price to earnings ratio is one of many multiples that you can use to value a company, then you have to assume that the multiples are going to decrease as you go forward in time. So as you're taking growth off of a company because it's growing at 50, then 40, then 30, then 20%, eventually over time. Your multiple has to decrease going forward to kind of account for the fact that there's less, high growth going forward. So, like the easiest way I would answer this is that, like, well, you've got to assume higher PEs in 23 than you do in 24, than you do in 25, and then you do in 30. So, like, just off the top of my head, and this is not going to be completely accurate, but like maybe 23 is a 50, and 24 is a 45, and then 25 is a 40, and then 30 is maybe like a 20. So like that's like kind of the rough math, but what you want to do is like build out a detailed, discounted cash flow model, and make sure that your decreasing PE ratios are kind of congruent with your price to earnings multiples that you're assuming in the near term. So if you were to model a company out perfectly, like with like PhD of finance level accuracy, which I would not recommend that anyone gets a PhD in finance, but what you would do is like, you would have like a discounted future cash flows where such that like if you had like a PE of 50 in 2023, then if you discounted the cash flows starting in 2023 or 2024, the same net present value would be equal to a lower PE multiple. So maybe it's a 45 PE multiple in 24, but that price is equivalent to your discounted cash flows if you were to start your discounted cash flow from 2024 and beyond. So it really is just kind of like a math equation. But the general principle is that you should have decreasing multiples going forward.
Yeah. One reference I like to look at is like, what's the biggest companies in the world, whether it's Apple right now has a PE and it's like at its most mature point, in my opinion. Like, I don't think they're going to get a whole lot bigger. They're going to grow maybe 10 or 20% at most. I don't know what they'll grow, but they're not going to be, they're so big, they can't grow anything near like they used to. And their PE right now is, and they're still profitable. Their PE right now is 24. So in Google, let me look at them. Their PE is 20 or 21. So if you're thinking Tesla 2030, and you think that they're sort of at the height of their growth at that point, maybe the PE would be 20 to 25 range is what I would estimate or speculate at. I don't know. That's my thought.
Yep.
All right, next question. Chris Pomerlow, Matt, do you have a model for Rocket Lab like you do for Tesla? Would you be able to share your earnings estimates?
Yeah, so I do have a model for Rocket Lab. I would say the margin for error is much higher than with Tesla because so much of Rocket Lab's earnings are related to whether a specific launch hits within the quarter or not. So, if they've got, say, a $40 million launch and they're accounting for, like 3 or 4 of those in a quarter, actually, I think that the launch figure is actually a bit lower than that. But whether a launch goes from in this quarter, let's say August to the following October, that's like a huge impact on the revenues for a quarter. But at the same time, they do have a pretty significant and growing portion of their business, which is related to providing services for the launch industry. So like reaction wheels and a lot of software actually. But with how acquisitive they've been recently, it's just I personally find it's actually quite hard to get a good read on how much of the revenue is going to come from these new business lines versus their core business, just because they're growing like crazy right now. So yeah, I do have a model. I'm trying to monitor it over time and try to improve my own accuracy in forecasting it. But I think with right now with how small, frankly, the revenue base really is, I'd rather get it a little bit more accurate before I start sharing it publicly. And even if I do start sharing it publicly, I think I'd probably prefer to do that just with our investor base first, rather than kind of broadly and publicly.
Yeah. From Dan Roberts on YouTube, what are your thoughts on the possible future shutdowns in Shanghai? I think that, they have the zero COVID policy stated publicly, and that was a big issue in Q2 for Tesla, especially, and a lot of companies trying to produce things out of China. I think I have to think, the Chinese government, I don't know, I'm not an expert. I do know that they're not a massive bureaucratic system like the U.S. government and a lot of Western governments are. I feel like they have some sense of competency in making decisions and changing course, and I would think that they have that sense of competency to make the adjustments on COVID, even though they have their zero COVID stated policy. Realize that this latest variants are not nearly as deadly, and they're much more transmissible, and you just have to adjust for that and live with it, sort of like the West is doing, at least in the US, even in California, which is like the most COVID paranoid state, like people are just sort of living with it now finally, like, okay, it's going around, just do your best not to spread it, and if you're we still have to ask you if you tested positive, but everything's going on as normal basically now. So I feel like China, the government there, if they're competent, like I think they are, they're making adjustments to maybe they have their stated public zero COVID policy, but I don't think they would shut down the economy again like they did, in Q2. I don't know. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I mean, it did scare me a little bit this week to hear about some of the.
Now I hear you.
It did scare me a little bit this week to hear about some of the lockdowns that they had in Macau. So if that continues and spreads, that would be concerning. But it does seem like I'm kind of shocked actually that the Chinese populace seems to be like getting out and demonstrating publicly against some of these lockdowns. So like that's something that you just don't think of as happening in China, basically since like Tiananmen Square back in '89, I think it was. So like the fact that the people are feeling so emboldened to actually, go out and protest publicly in China is, I think, a sign that the people don't have a whole lot of tolerance left for more restrictive lockdowns. So if the Shanghai plant does get shut down again, that would not be good. Like that. But the base case is definitely for me that, Q3, the plant is up and running and frankly ramping from here. So if anything kind of disrupts that and we have another, maybe it starts off as a 1 week or 2 week lockdown, but then it might drag into 2 months, that would be really rough for Tesla's financials. So I'm certainly going to continue to be watching it closely, but I kind of think that the government is getting close to the end of the public's patience for these continued, very aggressive lockdowns.
Yeah. Next question from Andreas Dowslet on YouTube Live. Do you think Elon will sell his Twitter shares before it goes to the courts? Yeah, that's a great question. I've been thinking about it. I mean, I've been putting posts out like, what happens to his 10% of Twitter that he owns, or 9.6% or whatever it is technically? What happens to that? And what happens, more importantly, to the $8.5 billion of cash that he raised in anticipation of acquiring Twitter, when he sold his Tesla stock? I don't think Elon, I think Elon sees a very bright future for Tesla and doesn't want to sell Tesla stock. Like that conspiracy theory goes, like he uses an excuse to sell Tesla stock. I don't think that's the case. Like, I think it was painful for him to sell Tesla stock, but he thought it was the greater good is to take control of Twitter, since it's become like the public town square, and he can make it a better public town square with free speech protected and so forth. So I think, he may buy. I personally think there's a significant chance he buys Tesla stock back. And he uses the cash he sell, maybe the cash he used to buy Twitter, he just sells the Twitter and holds that cash aside. But maybe the 8.5 billion of cash, a lot of that, majority of that he uses. People are like, oh, he could fund the Texas Institute of Technology, or he could do other things. He could start another Twitter competitor. Yeah, that's true, but that doesn't take 8.5 billion of cash. That probably takes like a couple $100 million, like the other 8 billion. What are you going to do with it? Right. So I don't think he wants to I don't think he wants cash sitting on his bank account losing money in inflation. I mean, he seems very concerned about inflation. Like he should, like, I don't know. To me, he seems very concerned about inflation. And I think he doesn't want his cash to just like sit there and turn to nothing and from inflation either. So, to me, I think there's a good chance he puts it back in Tesla stock, most of it. And he's not against selling a certain amount of Tesla stock. We know for something important later, if he sees something else important come up on the horizon in a few years. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you just said. I mean, like, I don't think he necessarily wanted this outcome, but with what he's found out since, to me, it seems unlikely that the deal goes through. So yeah, maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. Like my Super Bowl case is that he just plows it into Tesla shares. He divests of Twitter and starts buying a bunch of Tesla like this week. That'd be great, right? But I think that's
when the window opens would be after earnings. I think is when he would do it, probably. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, he can't actually do that right now, but I think maybe he holds on to his liquidity for a little bit. Yeah, like there's other stuff like you mentioned, like the Texas Institute of Technology and Science and Astronomical Space Studies, or whatever they end up calling it. But
yeah,
I'm trying to view this as much as possible as a neutral event, because I really want to be focused on Tesla's fundamentals. So I sure hope there's kind of like some flows benefit from this, where he's buying some more Tesla and not Twitter. If he does end up buying Twitter, I think that'll be an okay thing, because like for society, like I really do believe in the mission that he was trying to accomplish with Twitter. But with frankly how low the market has gone, I think he could probably do more with his money, and do better for his like Tesla investors by just kind of refocusing on Tesla, and instead of like it's almost like he's a vampire who's come like bit Twitter, and like Twitter's dying like based on what he's done to the company. Like he kind of inflicted a mortal wound on Twitter, it seems, and I don't know how Twitter comes back from this. Like, given how much information he's shared with people who probably weren't thinking about how many bots there are on the platform. But if I'm an advertiser on Twitter and all of a sudden I see all this stuff that Elon's talking about, I'm like, let's just advertise on Snapchat instead, or Facebook, or
Facebook, so, Instagram, or whatever. Yeah,
anywhere else but Twitter. If I think like they could be misrepresenting my advertising dollar efficacy by like 50% or more, I don't want to spend there. Like, I'd rather go somewhere else.
No.
So I don't
Yeah.
know. It does feel like
Yeah.
he's
Twitter's
inflicted a
going to
mortal
have
wound, and I
terrible.
don't know how this resolves.
I don't know either. Yeah. I see Henry Abanto in the chat says he's a Tesla bull, but come on, Elon wanted to expose Twitter and have a reason to raise cash with the incoming recession that he predicted. Yeah, it was brilliant. I don't think that's the conspiracy thinking right there. Like that's saying that Elon is not being genuine, number one, which I don't believe. I mean, of course, there's a possibility Elon is purposely misleading people. That's like almost saying he planned to mislead everyone here, right? That's the number one conspiracy theory. And number two, I think, if he thought the recession was coming, he wanted cash in case there was a recession, he could just buy like index puts on like SPX or whatever. He doesn't have to sell Tesla stock,
Yeah.
He could buy, like, it wouldn't affect Tesla disproportionately. Like, there's nothing bad for Tesla in particular coming that he saw that he wanted to sell Tesla stock in front of, that would be the conspiracy theory you'd have to put out there. Not that he saw a recession coming, because all the stocks are going down in the recession. You could just buy an index put on the NASDAQ or Russell 2000 or something and make a lot of money hedging himself, So I don't buy this conspiracy thinking that's going around that Elon did this, misleading everyone so that he has an excuse to get some cash before the recession, before everyone else got hit. I don't know. It's just so weird that so many people gravitate towards that theory.
The biggest proof against that theory in my mind is that he waived his due diligence. Because if he was planning from the outset to get out of this deal, he just wouldn't have waived his due diligence. He would have said, okay, like, I'm going to buy this subject to due diligence, and dig in and say, hey, looks like there's a big bot issue, so I'm going to walk away with like no legal liability because it was subject to due diligence. But the fact that he waived that initially, to me, is an indicator that he really did want the deal to go through. He wanted it to go through quickly, and then he kind of stumbled on this issue, and now he's trying to back out. If he was truly that brilliant, and like, I'm not saying he's not brilliant, but if he was truly that, like, crystal ball brilliant, where he could have known that the recession was coming and was just trying to like preserve his cash, then he would not have waived his due diligence. He would have just said, let's hold on to this subject to due diligence, and he would have backed out, and it would have been a much easier. There's a lot of legal commentators out there that say it's not a clear case at all that he's actually going to be able to walk away from this, for like $1 billion or even more potentially. So if he really did want to limit his liability, then he would have, retained the right to his, due diligence and then walked away.
Yeah. I mean, two words that describe Elon to me that I think a lot of people miss is that he's genuine and he's principled. He doesn't mislead people. He doesn't lie about things. He's just genuine. What he's saying is he's not trying to, he's speaking his mind. He's telling it like it is. And then he's principled, he does things out of principle a lot. So, that's why I think he probably is honestly trying to walk away from the deal at this point. I don't know if he takes it at another valuation though. If Twitter counters and is like, all right, we'll give it to you at 40 billion or something instead of 44. Like, I don't know if he takes that at this point. I don't know. So
yeah, I don't think that does. I mean, maybe like 30 billion. I could see that hit that working for him, but 40 from 44, I don't know that's enough of a drop. We'll see.
Even that at that price though, he might be it's possible he might be so principled that he doesn't want this no matter what at this point. Like, he might have been like, nope, this is too much of a, like, it's not even worth it for free or something. Like, he might have in his mind come up with the idea, like, I don't even want it. I don't even want this for free. It's such a poison pill, like such a poisonous, thing that I'll just set it much easier to start from scratch and build my own thing or whatever. So I don't know. We'll see. I think he would take it probably at a much lower valuation, but who knows how principled he is on this decision right now.
Yeah.
I saw a comment saying, what day did you put the picture of Elon on your mantle? Yeah, back there. A friend gave it to me as a joke like 7 years ago or 6 years ago for like a birthday present, and I've kept it ever since and put it on my office and my mantle. So it's kind of funny.
I was trying to find something fun. The only thing I have is this little kid's tiara. I don't have anything. I'm just a dad of 6, so this is what I have.
Yeah.
No sign Elon picture.
Well, it's not a signed Elon picture. It's just a
Oh, it's
picture.
not signed.
Yeah, print it off of the internet and just frame it. I don't know. From Jay-Z. Oh, not the real Jay-Z. Different Jay-Z. Okay. Do you think the energy crisis in Germany will impact Tesla Berlin production? Do you follow Germany macros? I have heard something about this, like pipeline being shut off now, or a bit of an energy issue. I got to look into that a little more. Have you followed that much, Matt?
I actually put out a video, or maybe it was a Twitter thread, I can't remember, on the Germany's energy economy, like 12 to 18 months ago, something like that. They've really screwed up, and they've been screwing up for like the last decade. And it's pretty sad actually, because Germany, like if you remember from like '08 and beyond, like they were leading the whole kind of like European Union economic policy and everything. Like when Spain and Greece were at risk of defaulting on their currencies, like Germany got to call the shots, and everyone thought that makes sense because they got the most economic pull. And now we're in the situation where like Germany is completely beholden to Russia, with their energy policy. And frankly, they've overbuilt some renewables, they've underbuilt a lot of transmission, and they're in the situation now where they have to kind of fall back onto coal rather than nuclear. And it's just the whole situation was so avoidable. So I don't think it's necessarily going to impact their production, Tesla's production out of Germany. It might marginally impact their costs, but if you look at the electricity costs as a component of, or as a percentage of the overall manufacturing costs, it's not that large. It certainly is a real component. And if you compared, like maybe in Germany, it's like 3% of total costs are electricity versus 2% in China or 1% in China. Maybe I'm not sure the exact numbers, but my sense is it's going to be somewhere kind of in that range where you may lose a point or 2 or 3 even of gross margin just due to these electricity issues that are going on. But electricity costs overall are going to be a relatively small component of the overall assembly
manufacturing.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, and they're off for I think a couple weeks, starting like right now or something in Berlin, upgrading the factory.
Yep.
I'm curious. I'm very curious to see what happens in August and September with Berlin after the upgrade, to see what kind of ramp up they can do.
Yeah, and Shanghai too, because apparently they've got a pretty big upgrade going on there too.
Yeah. Exciting. The end of the quarter, maybe. From Martin Muldoon, we love you, Martin. What is your CPA estimate for tomorrow? I mean, after the White House is like intentionally leaking things, I don't. I'm thinking it's going to be higher, but do they even know what the heck they're talking about? Do they really have the number? Or are they just like speculating to protect themselves? I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think the analyst consensus I thought was somewhere around like 6%. I can't forget the exact number, but that would equate to kind of a decrease from the peak, which was in April, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. It was either March or April, I think. So like in May and June, it had been kind of high and sustained, but not, kind of not rising. It was actually decreasing. So my hope is that it's actually kind of on this continued downward trajectory, because if it's actually increasing sequentially in the face of these rising rates, that's a very bad sign. My even with this kind of rumor of a leak, my sense is that we're going to see a decrease from where we were quarter over quarter in June. But really, anything with like a 5 handle, I'll be very happy. Anything with a 6 handle is kind of what I'm expecting. And then if it's like a 7 handle or beyond, then that's very bad news, I think. And the stock market will react accordingly.
All right, let's do maybe one more question. Maybe Alec will put up one more question. Here we go. From Tesla Economics. Oh, one of my favorite Twitter folks. Great Twitter handle name. It's going to go down in the ages. One of the best, I bet you, as Tesla becomes a bigger and bigger company. Everyone's going to know about Tesla Economics. It's going to be like a term in textbooks probably too. So question, you guys think Tesla will utilize the deferred tax asset liability this quarter to create cushion from the negative Q2 print? Yeah, it's a good question. You have any thoughts on that, Matt? What do you think James Stevenson thinks too? Has he mentioned it at all? I know he has thoughts on this type of
I
stuff too.
think he was calling for this to be used in Q4 of 21, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yeah.
maybe for those who are not familiar, this is a purely kind of like GAAP accounting metric. So it's based on the fact that Tesla, for the first 15 years of their existence, they had negative net income and therefore negative tax liability. So the concept of retained earnings is that as your negative earnings kind of accumulates over time, you have a tax benefit where if you do flip to profitability going forward, you don't have to pay those taxes, but there's a deadline on those. You have to use the tax benefit. So in other words, you have to be profitable enough in a short enough time frame in order to use the full amount of those kind of the cumulative negative tax benefits that you've created. So up to this point in time, Tesla has discounted their historic negative earnings and the tax benefit associated with those by something about 50%. It might be slightly less than 50%, but it's in like the $1 billion range, I believe, of how much this benefit is. And for years now, it has seemed pretty obvious that they will be able to utilize the full amount of that benefit in the next 2-3 years, something like that. But for some reason, we've never seen this this discount to the deferred tax asset be like fully recognized. And so essentially, if they were to say, okay, it's now highly probable that Tesla is going to be profitable for the next, say, 3 years, and therefore they will be able to use the full amount of the deferred tax asset that has been generated to date, then that is actually like a GAAP income statement benefit to them that will result in like a one-time earnings benefit. But it's not a cash benefit. It's not a recurring source. So in my mind, it's going to be discounted if it ever is utilized. But for all those reasons, this is the right quarter to use it if they can actually do that. So like I've just discounted this because like for 2 years or more, I've thought this was coming and it has just never come. So maybe this is the right quarter that it finally does come. And so like you could see some crazy situation where like Tesla reports $3 of earnings per share this quarter, but it's like all these crazy one-time items, including this. This would be over $1 per share, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And then you could have like the lease issue. You could have a really high credit issue, and there's so much noise going on already this quarter that I frankly would love to see this be utilized in Q2, just to kind of dampen some of the more negative news stories that could come out of this. But I'm not banking on
Bitcoin
it. My base case
and all this other stuff.
My base case does not presume that this happens, but if they have anything close to like $3 of earnings per share, like for sure they've utilized this deferred tax asset issue.
Yeah. I would hope they do it this quarter too. I know James Stevenson made a good point that he thought that for some accounting reason it made sense to do it in a Q4 of a year. So that's why he was big on Q4 last year, them doing it. He thought, but I don't know where he's drawing that kind of sensical conclusion from necessarily.
Because there's like a valuation exercise involved with it. So like I used to do goodwill impairment testing, for example, for like Sallie Mae was one of the companies that I did this for, and it's a very involved calculation where you're doing like a very detailed discounted cash flow analysis based on management's projections, and then you have to see okay, is that discounted cash flow net present value greater or less than the carrying value of the asset on the books? And so, if it's less than the carrying value, then you have to take an impairment. And so you don't do that every single quarter, at least in that level of detail. So it makes most sense to do that in a Q4 because you've got like a 10K associated with, you've got like, generally speaking, you're doing more detailed calculations in a Q4. But there's no rule that you need to do your more detailed calculations in a Q4. Like you could very easily decide that, the time is right and the probability is higher now that your deferred tax asset will be utilized, and so therefore you need to kind of do that discounted cash flow analysis.
Yeah, we'll know in 2 weeks from now, or 2 weeks and 1 day, I think, right? So
yeah,
or is it? It's not next week, is it? Oh, it is next week. It's a week
It
and
is
1
next
day.
week. Actually, yeah.
Wow,
Geez,
8
it's
days.
8 days.
Oh, wow. Sneaking up on us. All right. Well, next Tuesday, we'll be back and we'll be speculating about earnings the following day. And we'll see everyone next Tuesday. Thanks for joining us.
That should be exciting.